Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Injury Law Pod. I am your host, Eric Bartlett, 29-year personal injury lawyer, and this is the podcast where we talk about all things personal injury law related. And up today, depending on your news feed, the algorithm that the social media has for you, you very well may have seen the recent story, very tragic, nonsensical, just doesn't compute at all. But the story of a young Ukrainian who was killed on a public transit. And today we're going to talk about that. And of course, on this podcast, we talk about personal injury law. So we're going to look at what that looks like, a situation like this looks like in the personal injury law realm. What potential causes of action are there for, say, the family of this young lady? And just to see, dial it into Missouri, even though this didn't happen in Missouri, and just give an overview of the situation. And again, depending on what news sources you get, what social media feeds you have, this very well has come across a very politicized situation, which we're not here to talk about. We're just looking at the situation itself and how that relates to personal injury law. We often think of safety as a given as we go out into our world, but sometimes the unthinkable happens. And there was a young woman. Her name was Iryna Zarutska, and she was a young girl, I believe about 23 years old, who had recently come to the United States from the war torn country of Ukraine, seeking a new life, a better life. She was on her way home from work on a city train. And again, in an instant, her life was tragically cut short, again, with no reason why. But this is her story, and it's a story that raises critical questions about safety, responsibility, and legal avenues for justice in a situation like this. So, again, this happened in August, so last month. 23-year-old Iryna was stabbed on a light rail train in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the attack was unprovoked. The perpetrator had a long history of known criminal behavior. And while this tragedy happened, obviously many hundreds of miles away, it serves as a powerful case study for legal principles that affect all of us right here in Missouri. Today, I'll be walking you through how a case like this is viewed through the lens of our state's personal injury laws. We'll explore everything from assault and battery to the legal responsibilities that businesses and public entities have to keep you safe. And I'd like to just say at the beginning, this is one of those situations it always serves as a good reminder. When you're out in public, you have to make sure you're aware of your surroundings. And you cannot just be dialed in and locked in on your phone and not know who's around you and what's happening around you. Because again, unfortunately, in our current modern age, danger is oftentimes present, and we just cannot take safety for granted, even though we generally feel safe as we're going on about our business in a given day. But that's a side note. Let's talk about the legal framework as this set of facts breaks down in Missouri law. So, if, for example, let's say the family of this young lady wants to bring some kind of a legal action for the death of their daughter. When an event like this occurs, we immediately look at a few core areas of tort law. And I've talked about that in the past. Tort law is the area of law that personal injury falls under. Again, personal injury is the common term everybody uses, but the official legal term is tort law. And so it's important to distinguish, as I often do in these types of situations, between civil cases and criminal cases. You have to remember the state prosecutes criminal charges to punish the wrongdoer. A civil case, which again is where my practice is, it's about compensating the victim or their family for their losses. And again, in this situation, this young lady has died. So her family would be the ones to bring an action against those they believe are responsible and for which they're seeking damages for the loss of their daughter. So let's look at first assault and battery. Now, in civil law, an assault is the intentional act of making someone fear an imminent harmful contact. Battery is the actual harmful contact itself. So, in Ms. Zarutka's case, both are clearly present. Because this attack was fatal, the case moves into the realm of a wrongful death claim. And again, I've talked about this in the past as well. But in Missouri, our wrongful death statute allows specific family members, like a spouse, children, or parents, to file a lawsuit. The damages sought aren't just for lost income or medical bills that attended the death, but they can also cover the profound loss of companionship, comfort, and support, as well as funeral expenses. Now, clearly, in a situation like this, there absolutely would be a claim against this perpetrator for assault and battery. But as with so many things, there's really no real reasonable likelihood of any kind of monetary recovery against this individual. From everything that I know, again, he had a very long history of criminal behavior. I don't believe he had anything meaningful in the way of assets to go after to recover a judgment that a court might enter. And so, again, a lawsuit can absolutely be filed. A judgment can be entered against this person, but realistically, it'll probably never get collected. So then we have to look at what other options are there? Who else might be responsible? And that's where we take a look at a premises liability and negligent security potential claim to see if that is likely to produce some kind of money for compensating the loss that has occurred here. So, with this, we're looking at the environment where this took place, the train. Can an organization be held responsible? This brings us to the critical doctrine of premises liability. And in Missouri, property owners and operators have a legal duty to provide a reasonably safe environment. This isn't just about fixing a broken step, it extends to protecting people from foreseeable criminal acts committed by third parties. So, again, some key parts there, but the foreseeability is key because if this is something that has happened in the past, has been a continuing problem where crime is occurring on a train and the operator of the train, again, in this instance, a municipality, a city, a governmental agency, if they knew crime was a problem and they didn't do anything in order to enhance the security for those riding the train, there could be potential liability there under a premises liability cause of action. Now, again, to dial it in just a little bit more, the specific area we would be looking at would be negligent security. Two key questions that we're going to ask in this analysis. Number one, was the criminal act foreseeable? And again, I just talked about that. Was this something that had occurred in the past? And again, what types of crime were occurring, right? Were there violent crimes? Was it petty larceny? That's going to make some difference. But if there have been multiple prior violent type crimes in the past, and the municipality has not done anything to try and address it, that could potentially expose them to responsibility in this. So, whether the owner took reasonable steps, air quotes, is the key phrase. It could mean having visible security guards, installing and monitoring surveillance cameras, ensuring adequate lighting in parking lots, or having emergency call buttons. The specific steps required depend on the circumstances, particularly if there's been a history of crime on or near the property. And in this case, obviously, this was captured on surveillance cameras. That was clearly in place. The question is, was anybody monitoring this? Was there any way to have the camera feed go to somebody that could potentially respond to it in a quick and efficient manner, or monitor it to observe if someone was acting suspicious, something was going on? Again, if you've seen this video, it's difficult because the perpetrator does this quickly, randomly, and there's not a lot of forewarning that anything is really going to happen. So then the other question becomes, to what extent did they put security people on these trains, things like that, maybe just as a deterrence, right? Even if they're potentially to intervene, but also if there's people there, security type people, police officers, whatever that looks like, to prevent people from acting out in the first place. Again, it's all going to depend on how much the history shows of problems on these trains, and then to what extent the governmental agency acted in accordance with what had happened in the past. It's one thing, right, if this was the first time this ever happened. But if there's been multiple stabbings, assaults, batteries, whatever that looks like, before this ever occurred in the municipality, maybe they just installed cameras, but that's it, just to record what's happening. Probably not enough. They need to, it's very likely that they would be found to have not fulfilled their duty based on the history to put in place appropriate security measures to try and prevent something terrible like this happening. Now, in Missouri, there's been some cases that have come along. And again, the concept of foreseeability is crucial because someone can't be held responsible for something that just wasn't likely to happen, or they had no reason to believe it was likely to happen. So, again, that's a critical element. And there was a landmark case from the Missouri Supreme Court that basically illustrated the concept of foreseeability perfectly. And in that case, a man was stabbed on or near the property of a gas station. And the business argued that they weren't responsible for a criminal attack by a stranger. However, in that case, evidence showed there had been numerous prior police reports of crimes on that property. The court found that this history of crime made future criminal acts foreseeable. Again, the key wording there, because the business knew of the risk and failed to take adequate security measures, like hiring an off duty police officer or officers that they had promised the city they would do. It could be held liable for the victim's injuries. This case solidified the principle in Missouri that if a business knows or should know about a pattern of crime on their property, its duty to protect its customers increases significantly. Now, this principle that came from this Missouri Supreme Court case isn't limited to gas stations. It applies across many scenarios that you might encounter every day. For instance, an apartment complex with a history of break ins that fails to repair broken security gates or improve poor lighting conditions in its parking garage could be liable if a tenant is assaulted. A bar or a nightclub where fights frequently occur, they have a duty to provide adequate security or bouncers. If they don't and a patron is injured in a predictable brawl, the establishment could be held responsible. Even a shopping mall could be liable for an assault or something worse in a common area if it has a history of similar incidents and hasn't increased security patrols or surveillance. In all these examples, the key is connecting the history of crime to the lack of reasonable security measures. Again, we have a pretty good example here in town with the independent shopping center. There have been multiple instances of really violent outbreaks, and there's been questions about their security and what they're doing to provide a safe shopping atmosphere for those who are going for that purpose. And it's been an ongoing struggle with the independent shopping center. So, after looking at all of this, what are the most important takeaways? Well, first, again, I can't emphasize enough, always be aware of your surroundings. If you get on a public train like that, I personally would have my back to the window where I can see everybody and see what's going on. I would limit my phone time so that, again, my head isn't down in my phone, but I know what is happening, who's doing what, how people are behaving, just keeping an awareness of everybody around me. And it's just important, especially today when we get lost in our phones everywhere we go. But at the same time, you have to understand that you have a right to expect a reasonable level of safety in public places. And second, property owners are not just passive landlords. They can't just open up a place, invite the public in, and not have any responsibility. They have an active duty to protect you from foreseeable dangers, including crime. And finally, remember this: if for some reason you're a victim, the law provides avenues for you to seek justice and compensation beyond just the criminal case against an attacker. And again, most of the time, there's not going to be any money coming from the person that actually committed the crime against you. Again, they're most likely not going to have any significant assets or anything of that nature. And then, secondly, there's no insurance coverage for something like that. An intentional act is always going to be excluded under any insurance policy. So then it takes a broader view of things to figure out, is there some area, some other option for recovery of damages that comes out of some type of a situation like this? And that's where a personal injury lawyer can get involved and look at all the possibilities, do the necessary investigation, and figure out, was there a reason for the property owner, the business owner, the governmental entity, whatever that looks like, to have some awareness that there was a problem, it was foreseeable, and they should have put in place much better security measures. So, again, remember this as always: if you or someone you know becomes a victim, what steps should you take? The first priority is always your health and safety. Get medical attention immediately. You can worry about a lot of things later, but obviously, a police report, making sure the police know about the incident, that's important. And then, as soon as you're able, document everything that you remember: the time, the location, the conditions, any details about what security or lack of security was in the situation. Were there cameras? Any of that kind of stuff, right? What, because you want to know, is there going to be video of this incident? Just little things like that. And then finally, it's crucial to consult with a personal injury attorney if something like this happens, because again, there may be other avenues of recovery than you yourself can know about. And so, as always, we can help preserve evidence, understand your legal options, and making sure that any and all responsible parties are held accountable. And again, it's always a free call, and you're welcome to reach out, and we'll see if we can be of help, if we can investigate it, whatever that looks like. But the stabbing of Iryna Zarutska is a heartbreaking reminder of the fragility of life. And while no amount of money can undo a tragedy, the civil justice system provides a powerful tool to force businesses and property owners to take security seriously, which can prevent future tragedies from happening to others. As always, until the next episode, stay safe and stay well.